For 3 years he came to the same shooting range every Tuesday. Always missed the target. Always smiled when the young shooters laughed at his terrible aim. The range staff felt sorry for him, just another old veteran whose skills had faded with age, until the day a real threat walked through the door, and everyone discovered that the man who couldn't hit anything had been teaching them the most important lesson of all. Welcome to Hidden Valor Stories. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button right now. These lessons from forgotten masters deserve to be remembered. Pine Ridge Shooting Range sat 15 miles outside Raleigh, North Carolina, surrounded by pine forests that provided natural sound barriers for the constant gunfire. It was a serious shooter's range, 50 lanes, distances from 25 to 300 yards, and a clientele that ranged from weekend hobbyists to competitive marksmen preparing for state and national championships. Every Tuesday at 1:00 p.m. for 3 years, Robert Chen arrived in his 15-year-old Toyota Camry, signed the logbook with careful handwriting that suggested arthritis or age tremors, and made his way to lane 47, always the same lane, always the same routine. At 76, he moved with the deliberate care of advanced age, his frame smaller than it once was, his hands showing the liver spots and prominent veins that came with 7 decades of living. He wore simple clothes that never varied: khaki pants, a button-down shirt that had seen better years, and a baseball cap with no insignia or indication of military service. His shooting equipment was equally modest: a basic 9mm handgun that was reliable but unremarkable, a small range bag containing ammunition and eye protection, and targets that he brought from home rather than purchasing the premium ones the range offered. What made Robert Chen memorable wasn't his appearance or equipment, it was his shooting, or more accurately, his complete inability to shoot with any accuracy whatsoever. Week after week, month after month, year after year, Robert Chen missed his targets with a consistency that was almost impressive. At 25 yards, a distance where even novice shooters could hit the target paper, his shots scattered wildly across the backstop, hitting everything except the scoring zones. After 3 years of weekly practice, his skills hadn't improved even marginally. If anything, his aim seemed to be getting worse. The young competitive shooters who dominated the range had developed a routine around Chen's presence. They'd arrive early, claim the best lanes, set up their expensive equipment, and proceed to post scores that demonstrated their considerable skill. Then they'd glance over at lane 47, watch the elderly man fire another magazine that completely missed the target, and exchange knowing smiles. "Poor old guy," was the general sentiment, "at least he's trying." Marcus Webb, a 28-year-old software engineer who'd been shooting competitively for 5 years, had developed a particular fascination with Chen's weekly ritual of failure. Webb was good, really good. He regularly posted scores in the high 90s, had won several regional competitions, and was training for the National Rifle Association's Precision Pistol Championship. "I don't understand how someone can practice every week for 3 years and not improve," Webb observed to his shooting partner Jessica Martinez one Tuesday afternoon. "Even random chance should produce better results than what he's getting." Martinez, equally accomplished and equally puzzled, watched Chen fire another magazine that missed the entire target. "Maybe he needs glasses? Or has some neurological issue?" "Whatever it is, it's kind of sad," Webb replied. "He keeps coming back, keeps trying, but he's just not capable anymore. Age catches up with everyone eventually." Danny Foster, the range safety officer and former Army infantry sergeant with 2 tours in Afghanistan, had witnessed Chen's entire 3-year tenure of terrible shooting. Foster had tried to help, offering tips on stance, breathing, trigger control, all the basics. "I've given him every piece of advice I know," Foster explained to a new employee. "He listens politely, thanks me, and then proceeds to miss just as badly. At this point, I think he just enjoys the routine. Coming to the range, being around shooters, feeling like he's part of something even if his skills are gone." The new employee, Sarah Kim, watched Chen fire another magazine that scattered across the backstop without a single hit. "Has he ever explained why he keeps coming back? If I was that bad after 3 years, I'd probably try a different hobby." Foster shrugged. "He's polite but doesn't talk much. Pays cash, follows all the rules, never causes problems. Just shoots terribly and goes home. If missing targets makes him happy, who am I to judge?" What none of them knew, what none of them could have known, was that every terrible shot, every wild miss, every seemingly incompetent display was completely intentional. Robert Chen wasn't a man whose skills had faded with age. He was a man teaching a lesson that no one was wise enough to recognize. The dynamic at Pine Ridge changed when Marcus Webb decided to organize an informal shooting competition among the range's regular members. It would be a friendly event, he explained, a way for the shooting community to test their skills against each other in a low-pressure environment. $25 entry fee, Webb announced on the range's community board. Winner takes 60% of the pot. Second place gets 30%, third place gets 10%. Standard target scoring at 25, 50, and 100 yards. Anyone can enter. The announcement generated immediate interest among the competitive shooters. These were people who took their marksmanship seriously, invested in premium equipment, and spent hundreds of hours perfecting their technique. A friendly competition was exactly the kind of challenge they craved. Robert Chen saw the announcement during his Tuesday visit. He read it carefully, his expression neutral, then continued to his usual lane and proceeded to fire his usual terrible shots. Several of the competitive shooters noticed him reading the announcement and exchanged amused glances. "You think the old guy will enter?" Martinez asked Webb with barely concealed humor. "God, I hope not," Webb replied. "It would be embarrassing for him. He can barely hit the backstop at 25 yards. But when the entry deadline arrived, Robert Chen's name was on the list. 23 shooters had signed up, including most of the range's serious competitors. Chen's entry fee, paid in exact cash, as always, sat in the envelope with everyone else's. Foster pulled Webb aside when he saw the entry list. "Listen, maybe we should have a quiet word with Mr. Chen. I'm not sure he understands how competitive this is going to be. The scores these guys post, it's going to be humiliating for him." Webb considered this. He wasn't cruel, and the thought of publicly embarrassing an elderly veteran bothered him, but Chen had entered voluntarily, had paid his fee, and presumably understood what he was getting into. "Let's give him the option to withdraw," Webb decided. "Explain the situation, offer to return his entry fee, and if he still wants to compete, that's his choice." They approached Chen during his next Tuesday session. He was, as always, missing targets with remarkable consistency. "Mr. Chen," Foster began carefully, "we wanted to talk to you about the competition." Chen set down his weapon and gave them his full attention. His eyes were calm, patient, carrying none of the embarrassment or anxiety they'd expected. "Yes?" he said simply. Webb took over, trying to find words that were honest without being insulting. "Sir, this competition is going to feature some very skilled shooters. People who've been training for years, who have a lot of experience with competitive formats. We just wanted to make sure you understood what you were getting into." "I understand," Chen replied quietly. "The thing is," Foster continued, "competitive shooting can be intense. The scoring is strict, the pressure is real, and, well, sir, we've watched you shoot for 3 years. We're concerned that you might find the experience frustrating or embarrassing." Chen's expression didn't change. "Are you asking me to withdraw?" "We're offering you the option," Webb said quickly. "No judgment, no hard feelings. We'd return your entry fee, and you could continue your regular practice without it." "I'll compete," Chen interrupted gently. "Thank you for your concern, but I entered knowing what to expect." After they walked away, Martinez approached Webb with concern. "Did he agree to withdraw?" "No," Webb sighed. "He's competing." "This is going to be painful to watch," Martinez said, shaking her head. What they didn't see was the slight smile that crossed Robert Chen's face after they left. A smile that suggested he knew something they didn't. A smile that carried decades of experience teaching lessons to people who didn't yet know they needed to learn them. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather for shooting, clear skies, minimal wind, comfortable temperature. The parking lot at Pine Ridge filled early as 23 competitors arrived to test their skills. The atmosphere was friendly but serious, with handshakes and casual conversation masking the competitive intensity that would emerge once scoring began. Robert Chen arrived exactly on time, parking his Toyota in the same space he always used, carrying the same modest equipment he brought every Tuesday. If he felt any nervousness about competing against some of the best shooters in the region, his demeanor gave no indication. The competition format was straightforward. Each shooter would fire 30 rounds total, 10 rounds at 25 yards, 10 at 50 yards, and 10 at 100 yards. Standard target scoring applied, with points awarded for shot placement. Perfect score would be 300 points. The best competitive shooters regularly posted scores in the 200s. Webb, acting as competition director, called the first group to the line. Chen was in the third group, scheduled to shoot after the serious competitors had set the bar for performance. The first two groups performed exactly as expected. Webb posted 287, the second highest score of his competitive career. Martinez scored 2. The other serious shooters ranged from 265 to 280. These were exceptional marks that demonstrated years of training and natural talent. By the time the third group was called, the competitive atmosphere had relaxed somewhat. The serious shooters had posted their scores, established the rankings, and now watched the remaining shooters with casual interest. Most of the third group were newer shooters or older recreational marksmen who understood they weren't competing for first place. Chen took his position at lane 47, his usual lane which he'd specifically requested when signing up. The range safety officer called the line to attention and gave the command to commence firing. What happened next would be discussed at Pine Ridge for years afterward. Chen's first shot at 25 yards punched through the exact center of the target with a precision that made several observers blink in confusion. It had to be a fluke. The scattershot shooter had accidentally hit the bullseye. His second shot landed within a quarter inch of the first. Third shot, same location. Fourth, fifth, sixth, every round impacting within a 2-inch group at the center of the target. Webb, who'd been calculating final scores, froze mid-calculation. What the hell? Martinez moved closer to observe through the spotting scope. That's impossible. That's the same guy who can't hit paper at 25 yards. By the seventh shot, every person at the range had stopped what they were doing to watch. Chen fired with mechanical consistency, his movements smooth and professional, each shot producing the same result: perfect center hits that demonstrated mastery rather than luck. 10 rounds, 10 perfect hits, 1 ragged hole at the center of the target. 100 points. Foster stood behind Chen, watching through binoculars, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, "he's been sandbagging. For 3 years he's been deliberately missing." The targets were advanced to 50 yards. This was where good shooters separated from great ones, the increased distance requiring adjustments for wind, more precise trigger control, better fundamental technique. Chen settled into his shooting position. His stance was textbook perfect, feet positioned for stability, body weight distributed properly, arms forming a solid platform. It was the stance of someone who'd been trained by experts and had perfected the fundamentals through thousands of hours of practice. He fired. First shot, center mass. Second shot, touching the first. The pattern continued. 10 shots, minimal deviation, a group size that professional competitive shooters would struggle to replicate. Another perfect 100 points. Webb stood beside Martinez, both watching in stunned silence. "I don't understand," Webb finally said. "Why would someone capable of shooting like that deliberately miss for 3 years?" "I don't know," Martinez replied, "but we're about to see what he can do at 100 yards. The final distance was where competitions were won or lost. 100 yards with a pistol required not just technical skill, but mental discipline and perfect fundamentals. Minor errors in technique would be magnified by the distance." Chen approached this final stage with the same calm focus. If he felt any pressure from the 24 pairs of eyes watching him, his demeanor gave no indication. His first shot at 100 yards hit the 10 ring, not just on target, but precisely placed in the high-scoring zone. The shot was so clean, so perfectly executed, that several of the competitive shooters actually gasped. "That's a 100-yard pistol shot that would win national competitions," Martinez said quietly. "This guy isn't just good, he's world-class." Chen continued firing. Each shot demonstrated the same impossible precision. When he finished his 10th round, the target showed a group size that would have been impressive at 25 yards, let alone 100. Perfect score. 300 points. The range fell completely silent. Chen cleared his weapon, set it down carefully, and removed his hearing protection. His expression remained neutral, showing neither satisfaction at his performance nor awareness of the shock he'd created. Webb found his voice first. "Mr. Chen, what just happened? How? Why?" Chen turned to face the assembled shooters. For 3 years they'd watched him miss targets. For 3 years they'd felt superior, more skilled, more capable. For 3 years he'd been teaching them a lesson they'd been too arrogant to recognize. "I learned to shoot a long time ago," Chen said quietly, his voice carrying across the now silent range, Before there were fancy red dot sights and electronic targets, I learned when hitting your target meant the difference between survival and death. He paused, letting his words settle. For 3 years I've come here every Tuesday. I've watched young shooters with expensive guns and perfect scores treat this range like a video game. I've watched them focus on competition, on beating each other, on collecting trophies, but I haven't seen anyone focus on why we shoot. Foster stepped forward. Sir, who trained you? Chen's response was simple. Marine Scout Sniper School, 1968, served 2 tours in Vietnam. After that I spent 20 years teaching marksmanship at Quantico. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Marine Scouts Sniper School was legendary, one of the most demanding marksmanship training programs in the world. Quantico was where the military's most elite instructors taught. This wasn't just a skilled shooter. This was one of the men who'd trained generations of America's finest marksmen. But why? Webb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why deliberately miss for 3 years? Why let us think you were incompetent? Chen's answer would change how everyone at that range thought about shooting for the rest of their lives. Because you needed to learn humility, Chen said, his voice gentle but carrying undeniable authority. All of you. You came here week after week posting impressive scores, buying expensive equipment, competing for rankings, but somewhere along the way, you forgot what shooting is actually about. He gestured toward the targets downrange. You see paper targets with scoring rings. I see threats that need to be neutralized. You see competition and scores to beat. I see life and death decisions that have to be made in seconds. You focus on equipment and technique. I focus on purpose and discipline. Chen walked slowly along the firing line, making eye contact with the shooters who'd spent 3 years dismissing him. Every Tuesday I watched you laugh at my terrible shooting. You felt superior because your scores were better. You judged my ability based on what you could see, but not one of you ever asked why I kept coming back despite my apparent lack of skill. Martinez found her voice. Sir, what were you trying to teach us? That scores don't measure everything, Chen replied. That the man next to you might know more than you can imagine. That humility is more valuable than accuracy. Because without humility you stop learning. You become so convinced of your own skill that you can't see what you're missing. He returned to his position at lane 47. I've been coming here for 3 years because I wanted to see if anyone would look past the surface. If anyone would wonder why an old man kept practicing despite getting worse instead of better. If anyone would have the wisdom to question what they were seeing instead of just accepting the obvious explanation. Webb felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. 3 years of feeling superior to this elderly man, 3 years of casual dismissal, all while standing next to someone who'd trained the military's most elite marksmen. Sir, Foster said, his voice thick with emotion, I tried to teach you. I offered tips on stance and grip and trigger control. Chen nodded. You did, and every piece of advice you gave me was technically correct. But you never asked if I already knew those things. You assumed that because I was shooting poorly, I must not know the fundamentals. You saw what you expected to see, an elderly man whose skills had faded instead of considering that maybe I had reasons for my performance that you couldn't understand. Kim stepped forward hesitantly. Mr. Chen, if your goal was to teach us humility, why reveal your skills now? Because today you organized a competition, Chen explained. You created an environment focused entirely on scores and rankings, exactly the mindset I've been watching develop here for 3 years. It was time to demonstrate that the most important lessons in shooting have nothing to do with hitting the 10 ring. He picked up his modest 9mm pistol. This gun cost $300. Some of you are shooting firearms worth 5 times that amount. But the shot doesn't care about the gun's price tag. It cares about the fundamentals. Stance, grip, sight alignment, trigger control, breathing, follow through. Master those and you can shoot anything. Focus on equipment instead of skill, and you'll never reach your potential. Webb found himself thinking about the thousands of dollars he'd spent upgrading his competition pistol, all while assuming that the man with basic equipment must be less capable. Sir, Webb said, what should we have learned from watching you? That everyone you meet knows something you don't, Chen replied. That age doesn't equal obsolescence. That the quietest person at the range might be the most experienced. That shooting poorly doesn't mean someone can't shoot well. It might mean they're choosing not to, for reasons that have nothing to do with capability. Martinez asked, will you keep coming on Tuesdays? Chen smiled, the first genuine smile most had seen from him. Yes, But from now on I'll shoot properly. You've learned what you needed to learn. Now maybe I can teach you what you should have been learning all along." The following Tuesday, Pine Ridge felt different. The competitive shooters approached their practice with new mindsets. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like humility mixed with curiosity. Robert Chen arrived at his usual time and made his way to lane 47, but this time, instead of pitying glances, he received respectful nods and genuine interest. Webb was already there. "Mr. Chen, would you be willing to provide some instruction?" "Real instruction. I realize now that I don't know as much as I thought I did." Chen studied Webb. "What do you think you need to learn?" "Everything," Webb admitted. "I can hit targets and post good scores, but after watching you shoot on Saturday, I realize I've been practicing technique without understanding the fundamentals underneath it." "That's a good starting point," Chen said. "Recognizing what you don't know is the first step toward actually learning it." Over the next hour, Chen provided instruction unlike anything Webb had received. It wasn't about equipment or advanced techniques. It was about the basics: proper stance, correct grip pressure, smooth trigger press, controlled breathing. "You're pulling your shots slightly to the left," Chen observed, "not because your sight alignment is wrong, but because you're anticipating recoil and flinching just before the shot breaks. The gun is going to move. Your job isn't to prevent that movement, it's to make sure the movement happens after the bullet has left the barrel." Webb tried it. The next shot landed exactly where he'd intended. "Better," Chen said. "Now do it 500 more times until it becomes automatic." Martinez had been listening from the neighboring lane. "Mr. Chen, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you choose Marine Scout Sniper School?" Chen finished loading a magazine before answering. "Because I understood something that many young Marines don't learn until later, that in combat the most valuable skill isn't shooting the most bullets. It's making every shot count. Scout snipers don't spray and pray. They identify threats, calculate solutions, and execute with precision. One shot, one mission, one life potentially saved." He chambered around and aimed downrange. "That philosophy applies whether you're shooting in combat or at a range like this. Quality over quantity, purpose over speed, understanding over technique." His shot struck the center of the target at 100 yards, the first of many perfect shots he would demonstrate that afternoon. Foster approached during Chen's next reload. "Sir, I need to apologize. For 3 years I watched you shoot and assumed you needed help. Looking back, that must have been frustrating." "Actually, it was exactly what I expected," Chen replied with a slight smile. "You saw what you thought was incompetence and tried to help. That shows good character even if your assumptions were wrong. The lesson isn't that you were wrong to offer help, but that you should have been curious about why someone kept practicing despite lack of improvement." As the afternoon progressed, more shooters approached Chen with questions. Not just about technique, but about mentality, purpose, and the philosophy of marksmanship. Chen answered every question with patience and insight, sharing knowledge accumulated over 50 years. His instruction wasn't flashy, just fundamental truths explained with clarity that came from decades of teaching. By the end of the day, the dynamic at Pine Ridge had shifted permanently. Everyone approached the elderly man at lane 47 with the respect his skills and experience deserved. 3 months after Chen's revelation, Pine Ridge hosted another shooting competition. This one was different. Not just in format, but in atmosphere. Webb had designed it based on principles Chen had taught. "We're adding scenario stages," he explained, "not just static target shooting, but situations that require decision-making, target discrimination, and shooting under pressure." Chen entered this competition as well, his participation now expected and welcomed. The competition included stages testing more than accuracy. One stage required identifying which targets represented threats versus innocent bystanders. Another introduced time pressure and movement, forcing competitors to shoot while managing stress. Webb discovered his pure accuracy advantage disappeared when scenarios became complex. Chen dominated the scenario-based stages with tactical understanding and precise execution. After one particularly complex stage, Martinez asked, "Sir, in Vietnam, when you were using these skills in combat, was it anything like this?" Chen was quiet, then replied, "No. Competition can't replicate the stress of knowing that your next shot might be the difference between a fellow Marine living or dying. It can't simulate the weight of understanding that your decisions have permanent consequences." "Then why do it?" "Because competition teaches discipline under pressure," Chen replied. It teaches you to perform when you're being watched, when mistakes are visible. Those lessons translate to situations where the stakes are real. You won't rise to the occasion under stress, you'll default to your training. The second competition ended with scores reflecting a broader definition of marksmanship. Chen won, as expected, but rankings below him had shifted significantly. During the award ceremony, Webb addressed the shooters. 3 months ago, we held a competition about scores and rankings. Today was about understanding what it means to shoot well. The difference is because of Mr. Chen and the lessons he's taught us. Chen accepted his trophy quietly. Thank you, but remember, the trophy isn't the point. The learning is. The improvement is. Understanding that there's always more to learn from people who've been doing this longer than you've been alive. A year after Chen's revelation, Pine Ridge had developed a reputation for producing shooters who understood not just how to shoot, but why they shot. Chen maintained his Tuesday routine, now including formal instruction. Webb had become one of Chen's most dedicated students. I used to think I was a great shooter, he admitted. Now I realize I was just good at hitting paper under controlled conditions. That's growth, Chen replied. Real improvement often looks like regression first, because you're breaking down bad habits before building good ones. The range itself had changed. The competitive atmosphere remained but was tempered by mentorship. Advanced shooters helped beginners with genuine interest. On Chen's 80th birthday, Pine Ridge organized a celebration. Webb presented him with a target signed by hundreds of students. This represents lives you've changed, not just shooting, but approach to learning. Chen studied the target emotionally. Thank you, but remember, I'm not the lesson. The lesson is what you learned. Martinez gave him a plaque in honor of Robert Chen, who taught us that the greatest mastery is knowing how much we still have to learn. That's the point, Chen said. Every person here is still learning, still growing. The day you think you know everything is the day you stop improving. As celebration concluded, Chen walked the firing line alone, remembering thousands of deliberately missed shots. 3 years of apparent incompetence to demonstrate that expertise hides behind unexpected appearances and humility is the foundation of learning. He remained at lane 47 and fired one final magazine, each shot striking perfect center. Then deliberately, he adjusted his aim and fired one round that struck the target's edge. Webb noticed, "Sir, why miss that last one?" Chen smiled. "To remind myself that sometimes the most valuable thing is appearing less capable than you are. Humility isn't just acknowledging what others know, it's choosing not to display everything you know. Sometimes the greatest strength is the ability to appear weak." He packed his equipment, the routine as familiar as 7 years ago when he'd first walked through those doors with a lesson to teach and the patience to spend 3 years teaching it. The man who couldn't hit anything had become the man who never missed. But more importantly, he'd become the teacher who showed a community that the most important lessons come from unexpected places, and true mastery includes the wisdom to hide your capabilities until the moment when revealing them can teach something words never could. So I ask you, have you ever misjudged someone's capabilities based on appearance or performance? Someone who turned out to know far more than they revealed. Share their story in the comments. Let's honor the teachers who disguise their lessons in unexpected ways. Thanks for watching Hidden Valor Stories. If this moved you, subscribe and share. These lessons in humility and hidden mastery deserve to be remembered. We'll see you in the next one. And remember, the person you're most tempted to dismiss might be the teacher you need most.